Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the lead learner of the SCEA, Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves CEWL, and you can find out more information about what we do at CEWL at CEWL.us. Hope you're having a wonderful night, and I am really excited about tonight's conversation. It's something I've been looking forward to for several weeks now. Some of you may know who Steve Nuzum is and Pete Stone. Steve has been doing a lot of writing. He's done a lot of work for SC for Ed and just a lot of writing for different publications and a lot of advocacy work. And he also does something for us called CEWL Views. And if you haven't been to the CEWL website, and if you go to that CEWL.us and scroll down, you'll see a bunch of his articles. His latest article that he wrote was on the banned book, Dear Martin. So one of the things that he's been writing about is book censorship and the freedom to read. And then Pete Stone, if you haven't seen his videos, they're called CEWL Vibes. And these are usually short videos around 2 minutes. Some of them are really funny. Some of them are just really poignant. And he dives into sort of educational philosophy and provides some sort of thought-provoking ideas. And what I thought I would do is bring both of them on to have a conversation about the purpose of school. And the reason why we're having this conversation is because I think sometimes too often in education, the conversation is around like, how do we just operate in this system the way it is? Like, what kind of curriculum can we adopt? What kind of technology can we use to improve instruction? We use words like rigor and integrity and, all these other things like urgency. And I don't think we spend enough time asking ourselves, why do we have schools in the first place? What are they about? What are we doing with schools? And is the system that we're currently in, is the system that we operate in, like, is it the optimal system? Is it viable and is it sustainable moving forward? And is it causing some human misery? My thing is, people who know me, I'm creating a docuseries called Rehumanizing School. I don't think our school systems are set up to maximize human flourishing, and I think there's ways we can change them to improve upon what we're doing and make it a place where human wellness is a priority. So, without further ado, I want to bring on Steve and Pete. How are you guys doing tonight?
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So let's just hey Cassie, how are you doing? So let's just start off with first of all, give a little bit of background so that people know a little bit more about your experience in education. We'll start with Steve.
I was an English teacher and a research teacher for 16 years in South Carolina. My last year so far was last year. And since then, I've been, as you said, just kind of, I've been doing a lot of writing and some advocacy work, but I still feel like a teacher.
Pete?
I'm currently a teacher, teach English. Sometimes get asked, don't you want to do more than teach? I love teaching. I left medical school to come back into teaching after passing the boards. Poet friend from Chester, Vivian Ayers, sent me a letter cussing me out for going to medical school, encouraging me to get back into education. And she does workshops in open fields with Brainerd. Wonderful educator. But, I'm just have grown so weary of how we overcomplicate something that is so intuitive to what it means to be human, to teach and to learn. It was just burden the system and students and teachers, and every teacher has such great ideas. Speaking up for those who have a teacher's heart or listen to teachers. So yeah, I just happy to share videos and have a platform to share what I hear so many teachers say, get it out there to be heard.
My sense is, from studying the history of it, it seems like we've never really been on track, because I'm not sure that the school system was really set up for, like, let's just, what does it take for a human being to be well mentally, physically, socially, emotionally. I don't know if it was ever set up with that goal, end goal in mind. It was more like, maybe we'll get to that. Or maybe we'll do it in kindergarten, and then after that, that's when we need to start preparing them for the quote unquote real world. But it seems to me like Where we really started to get off track is after A Nation at Risk was released, which is, for those who don't know, is a report that came out during the Reagan administration that used test scores and how we compared on these test scores to our international peers, showing that we were supposedly falling behind, and essentially started blaming teachers and teachers unions for that we were not getting rid of the bad teachers, and we're trying to protect the bad teachers, and so we put in this accountability system, and then it's been reinforced really by both parties, whether it's No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top. It's been this idea that we're going to tie federal funding to the results of these test scores. To me, has made those tests go from this diagnostic tool, which would be useful, like to determine whether a young person is behind in reading or math, and then we know where to target and tailor support for that child, to a sort of this test and punish culture where we're in competition with each other, with different districts, with states, and we have to hold teachers accountable, because otherwise they won't teach well if we don't hold their feet to the fire. And that system of accountability, making testing the god, has really, to me, has been such a detriment to the overall well-being of teachers and students. And what do y'all think about that?
Well, you mentioned A Nation at Risk, and I think that's a really good kind of place to start, because that is an example of something that we call it a study, but it really wasn't a good faith study, as you said, to kind of diagnose or understand students. It was a situation where a political administration said, we want to tell the story that public schools are failing. Go out and find us the numbers that show us that schools are failing. And I don't think that's unique really to the Reagan administration. I think, as you said, this has become a bipartisan consensus that the best way to fix schools is to attack them all the time, or to measure them with these kind of metrics that were never really created to do that. At best, things like the Stanford-Binet test, which is where a lot of these come from, which was useful for some things at some point, it's also kind of problematic. But a test that was designed to see if people were going to be suited for the infantry, basically, is now being used to try to holistically assess whether or not someone is intelligent. And so I think we got off track a long time ago, and the Nation at Risk report is a good example of how we kind of weaponize that against schools instead of using it to try to help schools.
Yeah, well, briefly touching on some other things, the complicated history of standardized testing. Look at a eugenicist starting the SAT to prove that one race was superior to another's, and we still use the SAT. Starting to phase out a little bit now, but that's a very problematic inception. But we kind of have this dogma now that standardized testing is how we know if someone is learning and making progress. You've been going to the State House, Essie Fred. I remember politicians stand up and say, well, how else are we going to know if students are making progress? What else could we do besides giving the standardized test? I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe we could train people for 4 years with the best and the brightest of how to work with human beings, and those individuals could spend all day with those students and gradually assess, differentiate who needs what, and we could call these individuals teachers, and these teachers could tell us, like doctors tell patients.
That's right.
Doctor may order a test, but then that doctor interprets the test and then tells it. The doctor doesn't order a test and turn it over to some third party and say, all right, well, that might be happening. That's another problem in big medicine too, right? You don't have a doctor differentiating what this patient needs. So I'm going to order the test to serve the student. And where we are now is the students are serving the test. Students are serving the politicians. And we just have, it's dogmatic just to start from the belief that these tests are telling us what intelligence is in the first place. Like you mentioned, there might be a use and purpose for them somewhere. I don't like to be anti anything that becomes shutting off. So sure, I'm sure you can find some useful purpose. If teachers have a way of meaningfully using them, great. But I think everybody's thinking that we know these tests are not helpful. This is where we just need to stop playing the game that they are. And I want to speak a little bit about ways we can do that before waiting for politicians to catch up and do it.
And that's what it feels like. It's been gamified, right? There's this just
Mhm.
it's like we're in competition and we rank the states like we do football teams, and it becomes this competitive atmosphere rather than this collaborative atmosphere. And then there's this idea that we're going to hold this over you and punish you if the kids don't do well. And extending your metaphor, Pete, which I've always thought is like if I go in to my doctor and he says I want to measure your cholesterol, the quality of the doctor isn't dependent on what that what the cholesterol screening says. It's
Yeah.
just that then the doctor has information that they can use to treat me, right? They
Mhm.
may prescribe a statin, or they may say, "Hey, let's try to manage it with diet and exercise, and then we'll test it again and see where you are." But if I don't do the diet and the exercise, or I don't take the statin, we again take the test again. We don't then lord over and say you're a bad doctor, and that's like to me, that's what we're doing. It's like the, we're measuring, and instead of saying let me see if this doctor is actually prescribing the right medicine and doing the
Mhm.
right things as a doctor procedurally, we just say like we just need to see your patient's testing, and then that determines whether you're a good doctor or not.
It's
And that to me sums up in a easily understandable metaphor what's happened to our profession. And it's stupid to
Mhm.
keep reinforcing it, but I don't see enough teachers coming together to say, let's stop this. We need to, I think parents are against this, and I also see this as a left right issue. When I talk about let's cut down on testing, it seems to be a bipartisan issue. Like conservative and liberal friends are all like, yeah, oh yeah, let's stop all this testing. But then why do we keep doing it? Why do we keep
and
you know
there's a big division between parents and educators right now, supposedly. I don't believe that that exists in reality, but there's a trying to push that parents and teachers are against each other. But really, I don't talk to many parents. The vast majority of parents say, I really love my kids' standardized testing. It's my kids' standardized testing. I had babies so they could do well in standardized testing. That's a very small percentage of
right?
parents. Parents and teachers on the same page with this. I
Yeah.
really think if we start asking, bringing this to light, people say, why the hell are we still doing this? You
Yeah.
know, at some point.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, uh, there are a lot of parents, even in South Carolina, where there isn't a formal opt-out policy that will regularly opt their kids out. But I think the vast majority of parents are fed up with it. But like most of us, that's the rules, so we kind of accept what it is. I'm not blaming parents, but I think that's what teachers are also doing. We know that
Right.
there are problems with with the and I think we all agree it's not so much that tests are a problem, is that the way that we are using them and the frequency with which they're using them, does it, and the high stakes that we put on them. Like in South Carolina, we that's part of how we hold back third graders is how did they score on a standardized test. The goal seems kind of noble, that we're concerned about literacy, for example, in the case of Read to Succeed, which requires that. But rather than, like we're all, I think, saying, rather than using expert knowledge to figure out how literate are our kids and what do we do to move them forward and what are the research based kind of practices that we know would help them do that, we have allowed politicians to write a law that sounds good and it has maybe a good goal, but it doesn't do the things that we know are going to actually help those kids, or even find out how much help those kids do need. I mean, to go back just for a second to the nation at risk thing, the big sort of faulty premise that it was based on was in comparing a very small data set. We're talking about 1984, 85, something like that. We're you know but only a couple decades out from like a heavily segregated school system where the systemic inequalities were vast, and the data in that study didn't take account for that. So it's sort of pretending that we hadn't made tremendous progress in public learning and literacy rates in those few decades, and instead sort of comparing it to a abstract number that we wanted to be at. So I think that kind of comes into play with all of this. Like, how are we going to use an out of context number to pit that school X against school Y and not try to account for all the variables that probably are making that happen.
And that's one of the reasons why I have such a problem with like the state report cards for schools, because there is no real nuance or context when the public when you reduce that to like a letter. There's really no context. There's really no full understanding of what that letter means, and really no conversation around it. So if if your school doesn't do well on the report card, you just have that stink on you, that brand on you. And it's like, and the other problem to me is, like, I think we all agree we need to be assessing kids' reading ability, math ability, writing ability. But when you say that this is the primary metric, this is the metric that we value the most, and it's the only one we're really paying attention to, it's the only one that really impacts your report card and the way we view your school leadership and your teaching as a teacher, then what we know that what happens systemically is the things that aren't measured don't get valued. So if you don't measure something, you're not really valuing it substantially in a day. And so then, my kid's mental wellness, it's not measured A, B, C, D. Like, Pete, you do this brilliantly. You talk about this brilliantly in your videos. Like, there's so much that can't be measured in a standardized test because of just the way it's structured.
Right.
But that stuff is so important to the well-being of a human being. So when you're 18 years old, you get a 1600 on your SAT, but you're riddled with anxiety and depression, or you're not in good health. Then does the score really trump that? Like, well, but he got a 1600, so that's all that matters. And that's my problem is what gets sacrificed at the altar of testing is really, to me, the most fundamental stuff that we need to be well as human beings. And when you say that, the thing that I get frustrated by is when you attack testing, or they think that you're attacking, like, you just don't want to be held accountable, or you're just whining, or you're complaining, you're protecting bad teaching.
Right.
And it's like that. No, it's the exact opposite. It's like, I don't want I don't want my teachers to focus on my kids preparing for a test. I want a more holistic approach.
Yeah, let me add one other gaslight thing that gets told a lot is you don't think every child can be successful. And that's why you're pushing back on these tests. But really, everybody can do well on these tests, and you just don't believe everybody can be successful. It's like, no, I do. My problem is that test is not determining what successful actually is. So I do believe every child can be successful. In fact, that's why I'm so against standardized testing, because it's standing in the way of what you said, what true success would look like. And Steve published an excellent article, I believe, that showed that what these tests really measure are districts that are in more impoverished areas than others, almost across the board. And I believe anybody anywhere can, if you really push it, we can get test scores up anywhere. Sure, it's like if I go to the gym to get my bench press up, I can bow my chest out, go through all these fake, I can push up more weight, but I haven't actually gotten any stronger. I've just gained the system where I'm not moving the
Mm.
bar as far. So if you put all the emphasis on a test, there are ways to get better test results without actually increasing the well-being, as you mentioned, of any child at all. And this is where trust has moved from educators. I think why educators are leaving the profession. Trust has left the student. It's very unhumanized, is what you're pushing. And as a result of that, it's hollow and empty. And that's why we have this increase in anxiety, increase in depression, increase in teachers saying, screw it, it's pointless, increase in students just on their phone all day asleep. And we say, oh, this Generation Z. No, we're not serving them very well with anything meaningful. Kids don't want to be entertained. They want something that is meaningful. It's very natural to humanity to learn and teach.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and we know that we've learned so much in the past few decades about how the brain works, and so much about brain development, and almost none of it's reflected in the actual way that we administer standardized tests, for example. Like, there's nothing in brain research that says it's good for you to sit for several hours at a time
Indoors.
on one task that's not engaging, that's not related to anything authentic in your life. It's easy from the outside to say, like, kids are lazy because they're sleeping through the test, but these things are not designed for the way that especially developing people's minds work. And not only, like Todd said, does it make us focus on, this subject or that subject, and the pendulum always kind of swings. This year it's literacy and next year it's numeracy. But even within the subjects, like as an English teacher, which standards or which indicators we decide are easiest to test on our state test, that becomes our year in a way, what we're pushed to focus on. So even within a content where you think, well, at least we're paying a lot of attention to English, but it's which parts of English are the easiest to standardize. So,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that most people who liked English in school or who teach English or who are writers or who are avid readers, they're not interested in those pursuits because they want to be really good at these kind of artificially discrete skills. And it's a pretty poor way to measure someone's literacy to have them sit down and do something that literate people don't do, which is read things they don't care about, that don't matter to them,
Right.
and then answer a series of kind of inane questions about them. And I think most of us have probably seen examples of where, for example, they've given Nobel Prize winning poets passages that were based on their own poetry, and they couldn't necessarily pass the test themselves because that's not what they cared about when they didn't sit down and write a poem so that they could have this very specific one-dimensional analysis of it.
Yeah. What did it mean? A, B, C, or D?
Right.
Like,
my goal is to get better at standardized tests. What I want to do with my existence.
Yeah.
And I mean, I say all that as somebody, I was very good at standardized tests. I'm still good at it. It's a very specific skill. And I don't know that it's ever aided me in any other way besides making it easy to pass the praxis and be a teacher. That was nice, but does it make me any better at life, or, does it make me any happier? No.
Yeah. My fear, I've read a lot of Neil Postman's work, and when I taught teacher cadets, we would talk about, he had a book called Teaching as a Subversive Activity, which is a great book. I highly recommend it. We'll talk about the relevancy of what you're doing, and what I see happening in this gamified system. The kids who are succeeding are the ones who see, like, yeah, this isn't what I'm interested in for the most part. I don't really care. I don't have any investment. I don't really have a voice in what I get to do for the majority of my day. But what I see is this end goal. Like, I want to get into college, or, I want to make a lot of money. So I'll jump through these hoops that they tell me to jump through. I'll memorize all this stuff for the test, regurgitate whatever I need to do, create a paper that doesn't have real meaning to me, that only one person's going to read and grade and give it back to me. And I don't care about it, but I know how to jump through the hoops to get where I need to be. There's those kids. And then there's the kids who are dropping out or sometimes have behavioral issues. And really, to me, they may be the ones having the sane response to the system, saying, this isn't, like, I have natural curiosity in me, and you're squishing it out of me because you won't let me have any voice or choice in what we're doing through the day. So my question to you both is, like, who is this serving? Like, and if both people on the left and right, teachers, parents, and students all see the system as a problem, then who is it serving?
Well, Pearson and like companies like Pearson that manufacture tests, the company that makes our state English tests, Data Recognitions Corporation, I think, got that contract by suing the state because the state tried to move to a like more readily available national test like the ACT, and the company sued them. So that's part of the reason why they're still in that game. But I mean, it's a huge industry.
My understanding is it's $1.7 billion a year we spend on standardized testing every year. So it is huge. It is huge.
Yeah, and then all the study guides and software and all that kind of stuff. And I say all this as someone who my students get really good results on standardized tests because, as you said, Todd, what I'm teaching them is it's about. So I have to go, unfortunately. That's right. I think Gene was from Lars, I believe. So hope all is well in Lars. But about the get good results on the test is I tell them it's a process to prepare them for whatever bullcrap standardized test that they might have to take. And it is a small part of jobs to get qualified, accepted, a license or whatever. It is a small portion of what the real world might be, but it occupies such a tremendous amount of time. And then districts are who's really upsetting me the most, because they really push these benchmarks or these common formal assessments. So it's not just a standardized test, it's all the preparation tests the district then rolls out. And this is where I really feel betrayed by district. I answer your question, this doesn't benefit the districts, but I really wish that districts would stand with their educators, and instead of the State Department so much and the politicians. And this is what really frustrates me, because they could. Good teachers will close their door and do what's best for the students. Good administrators in the building will say, all right, thank you, district office, and then go do what's really helpful for the students. If district offices would stand with the teachers instead of showing up for gotcha games and busy work to justify their jobs, and just listen to the actual educators with the students, it would solve so many problems that we're currently having, because you could reduce the additional testing that districts are adding to the state mandated testing. So we could lessen the burden on the local level if districts would stop pretending it's benefiting them or benefiting the students. So you
Yeah.
mentioned one time how it's structured from the top down is a tremendous part of the problem. Those disconnected from the classroom are the ones that keep making the decisions about how to monitor for accountability. And I think the test makes that real easy for people who aren't in the classroom, who aren't the students, to pretend like they can now tell what's going on in a classroom.
Well, I've heard that argument too, in a different district, but I think it's common to a lot of districts, from a really smart superintendent that I used to work for, who said, he wasn't really for standardized tests. But on the other hand, how am I going to know that in this big, huge urban district, with lots of schools, that like history teacher A and history teacher B are teaching the same thing?
Right.
And of course, my question to him was, well, why is that important?
Yes.
That they're teaching the same thing.
Right.
And his answer was, and I understand where he's coming from, although I did not agree with him. His answer was that in the interest of fairness and equity, we don't want this student to get a better education than this student, or this student to get a worse education than this student.
But see,
And I
that
think
word equity, though, equity doesn't mean doing the same thing for everybody at the same time.
Agreed. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that he would have agreed with that too. So that's why it was so kind of striking to hear him say that. And I told him then, and this is what it makes me think of now. It really, we learned our lesson about this a long time ago. I mean, in the late 1800s, there was this guy named Frederick Winslow Taylor, and he invented this system of scientific management of factories and
That's
workers.
one of your blogs, and people who need to read Steve's blog in detail about this. Go ahead. Sorry.
But I mean, we still see it, like it's something that Amazon's try to do, with the metrics that they use, which really remind me of kind of the way we think about students when we boil them down to these test scores, like how many boxes did you move in an hour? That's Taylorism. Taylor invented a shovel, for example, that was like the optimal shovel for shoveling coal. And he said, you should be able to shovel this number of pounds of coal in an hour or whatever. And of course, it made sense to him. And like a lot of the people that were talking about making these decisions, he'd never worked in a factory. He was the son of a mill owner. And I think he meant well, actually. But
Right.
Workers hated it because it was taking away the humanity and the individuality of their work, because that's too simplistic of a measurement of whether or not I'm doing a good job. This one little thing that you've sort of narrowed it down to. It makes it very easy for you as a manager to easily compare,
Right.
but that comparison might be meaningless, but it makes it easy. It makes your job easier, and it makes my job less and less meaningful, and maybe harder too, because now I'm being held up instead of to a realistic idea of what I personally am able to do, this competition with everybody else that does the same job. And it also obviously makes it an incentive to make people's jobs kind of dumber and simpler, because then the metrics become easier
Yeah.
I think that's something that we've tried to do with the education system too. We really want to make it simple. We really want to make teaching a job that anybody can walk in and see, are you doing a good job or not? But I think that if we really asked ourselves if we really want that person teaching kids, most people, if it was their own kids, would say, no, I don't want someone doing, I don't want my teachers of my kids to be doing such a simple task that anybody could walk in and do it.
And what you're getting at is exactly what I mean when I say we're dehumanizing it. It takes the teaching and learning process from this very human sort of art form to it reduces it to this technical mechanical process. And when you do that, that's when you start stripping out the humanity from it, because the students are just data points and the teachers are just preparing kids to operate on that test in a better way. And that's simple to understand, like, and that's simple for the public to understand. We gave the kids these tests. Here's the score, here's your report card. And it oversimplifies and makes that system so much less human. And in my view, like, part of the problem is that you're referring to with the administrator, and you feel sorry for folks that are at the district office level or an administrator, because a part of the problem is the scale of the system. When you have, if you're a superintendent and you've got 50 schools, you got 50 administrators and hundreds, if not thousands of teachers and thousands of students, how do you manage that? How do you manage that if you don't start to turn it into a technical process, if you let it be human and a little bit messy and democratic, and allow teachers to do different things and experiment? Because then if you allow for the experimentation and it doesn't work, then I'm being held accountable. Like, why did you let the teacher do that? So it feels like, to me, it's like the whole system has become about command and control from the top down. Like Pete said in his last video, it's this top down command and control. And that's because that's the only way to manage the school system at the scale it's at. And we're consolidating more districts. And so you have to command and control it that way, because you're being held accountable for the final score. And the metric is the test. And so then everything has to configure itself around that sort of the way that game is scored. And that's, to me, what dehumanizes the whole system. And that, to me, is what's leading to this huge increase in mental health issues and teachers just leaving the profession, trying to go find some place where they can be creative and they can have some autonomy and they are respected, and their intelligence isn't reduced to this mechanical process.
Well, and what's really sad about that is that in this country, the history of public education in this country is very tied to the idea that public education is essential for democracy. And the reason that the first thing, I mean, I mentioned to y'all before this started, I was rereading Derek Black's book, Schoolhouse Burning, and he talks about the history of American schools in general. But one of the first places that we had widespread public schools in the country was in the South. And the reason is that after the Civil War, when states had to basically resubmit constitutions to rejoin the Union, one of the requirements that the federal government had kind of always wanted to place on states, but didn't really have the leverage to do it before, was, well, you have to have a system of free public schools. And the people that really built those systems were formerly enslaved people, because they saw that as the quickest route, not just to like get a job or something, but to be citizens and to be empowered people who could be part of society. And that's something that a lot of the founding fathers on down had pushed for, because they really came out of this Enlightenment idea that to be a full human being, you had to engage in learning for its own sake, to make you like a smarter, better person, and not just to accomplish some goal. Like, people didn't want to learn to read just so they could get a job that required them to read. They wanted to learn how to read because they wanted to be more human.
Mm.
Yeah, I think comments too that the hierarchy creates such a distance that the decision makers are so far away from the reality of what they're doing, and the ones that see the reality aren't heard. But you mentioned something earlier, Ty, I think Steve touched on it too, that so much of the system is geared towards preventing, quote, bad teaching, that it's hyper fixated on stopping bad teaching. And the result of that, it's either completely indifferent or antagonistic to brilliant teaching.
Yes.
Even when you get amazing results, you get penalized. So oftentimes the managers that are set up, be it admins or district office, they're so fixated on looking for the I can statement on the board that they ignore the tremendous results you're having with real life success from your students. Heck, I even get good test scores and it's still just whew, and it says this little box. But if it's outside of that, because oftentimes people are put in these positions have actually don't have any real experience teaching high school, but they're now the high school uh, instructional whatever, and they've never taught high school. So these are fixes even within a terrible system that could happen if the focus became, and teachers are guilty of this too, of looking for the bad students. And if you look for students to be bad, they will be bad. When you look for the bad, you find the bad. When you look for the good, you find the good. We have to stop looking for what's wrong and we need to start looking for what's right, what is working, what is successful, and lean into that
Yes.
more. And that will start to grow. Whatever we think upon grows and flourishes.
That's the point of this docuseries I'm creating called Rehumanizing Schools. I've been spending a lot of time critiquing the system, but that doesn't do any good if you don't know well, what do you want? Like you're critiquing the system, you're saying let's end standardized testing, but what does it look like when you end that? Like, how do you operate? What kind of operating system are we moving towards? So that's what this docuseries is going to be about. I wanted to touch on what I think underlies a lot of this, which is when we think about like why is this happening? Like we live in a capitalist society, and I don't want to like get into this whole like, where we're going to be accused of being Marxist indoctrinators. But but like there is this drive of capitalism when you look at like what is the purpose of school to get kids college and career ready so they can sort of fit into this capitalist system. And going back to Steve's idea of the Enlightenment, it's like, yes, I do want there's some practical uses for education, like to be able to acquire a career where you can make a living and that's meaningful and purposeful to you. That's what I hope for my kids and every kid. But when you make that the only purpose of school, like this, just to get kids ready for a career, for a college, so then they can get ready for a more lucrative career, that to me then says that all the other stuff about life, this is like a Dead Poet Society speech. It's like beauty, love, all these other things, poetry.
Yeah.
What if they
What
don't?
are you
If
staying
they don't
alive for?
yeah, exactly. What are you staying alive for? And what if they don't lead to you flourishing within this capitalist system? Then why would we even waste time on them? That can just be something you do after school or whatever. It can be like a after school activity. So talk about that, the sort of the economic pressures that have played a part in reinforcing the system as the way it is.
I can't speak too much to the capitalism, socialism. Admittedly, I have not read much of those theories. And when we throw them out there, I think they have such different meanings in different individuals' minds that you really have to hammer out what you mean by each ism before you say this is what I'm talking about. I mean, you can look at communist China, for example, and say, have they really done a better job of
Right.
human development and freedom? So,
Right.
um, so whether it's capitalism, socialism, or whatever ism, the important thing is the problem is you treat everything as a means to an end instead of a means in and of itself.
Mm.
And this is something throw in there with artificial intelligence, for example. Artificial intelligence, the fear I think it strikes in us is it hits that ego in ourself that says, if it's about being the best, the fastest, the smartest, whatever, we're screwed. We're just done. We can't keep up with that. But if it's about something else, I think in that book you mentioned, Todd, of the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere.
Yeah.
I think it's the left hemisphere you
It's
said
called,
that's all
it's
about.
called there's a book called No Self, No Problem. And it talks about we value left hemisphere
Yeah.
qualities, which are more language based rather than the right brain stuff.
Yeah. So ChatGPT AI is like left, look, we're getting so efficient in that realm that computers are going to kick our butt. But on the other side of it, it's not about competition at all. It's not about doings. I say a lot. I love that quote. We're not human doings. We're human beings. It's about being. When you went to the great Oracle at Delphi, know thyself. But on the other side, just said, know thyself. You are. Didn't say you are this or that. It's just you are. And so it's what taught with students. Say, students, you are magnificent. You are, and we don't have to do anything to prove that. Nothing can take that away. You are magnificent. And then once you tap into that spirit of I am alive on the only planet of greens and blues in the whole universe has life on it, and I am here and I am, oh my gosh, then that empowers doing, not as the end in itself. The goal doesn't matter at all then, but I'm so full of life that then it naturally grows into doing something versus I have to do something to prove that I'm significant. Bull crap. You are significant. Start there and then let that inspire what you actually do.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think we should really be concerned about how difficult it is to motivate people to kind of go through this system, because again, there was a time when people who had nothing, had no food, had no property, had no rights, the first thing they cared about was becoming literate, becoming part of like the conversation with other people. And I mean, obviously there were practical, like we keep saying, it's not taking away the fact that there are practical skills to be learned by doing all this, but there was a time when people, one of the stories in Derek Black's book that I'm just sticking out to me right now was about, there were people, obviously that were at a lot of personal sacrifice. We're trying to start up new schools that were funded usually by just community. Let's throw together what little money we have, especially in the South, where there was a real resistance to having even a public school system. And South Carolina, for example, it was illegal not only for enslaved people to learn to read, but it was illegal for them to have any kind of meeting where they might be like learning any kind of like philosophical mental thinking skills. So for the thing that people wanted to like put all of their resources into to be learning, I think it just proves that that's something that's fundamental to human beings, and it goes across cultures and it goes across economic systems and political systems. So if we've messed that up and made a lot of schools so pointless and boring that a lot of people hate it and drop out, sleep through it,
The majority do.
act out, like I'm not saying that those problems are complicated and they're caused by a lot of things, but at least some of it has to be that, yes, we messed up our system. We learning is inherently interesting to everyone, I think. But that doesn't mean that taking an exam on this topic that you're interested in is going to be interested to kids. And not everything needs to be interesting, but this idea that we got so far away from just the fundamental drive to want to learn that everybody has, that we made school kind of feel pointless to a lot of people. It should be really making us reflect, but I don't know if we're there as a society yet, but we should really be reflecting on that.
So in the school that I went to, one of the schools that I went to interview that'll be featured in Rehumanizing School, they use something called the Reggio Emilia approach. And they're very much in tune with what are the students curious about today? What do they want to learn about today? And then they have sort of there's a structure there. It's not like they say, well, we want to learn about Minecraft today again for the 8th time. It's like I think that's the problem is, we talk about not trusting teachers. We don't trust students.
Right.
We don't trust students' natural curiosity. It's there. We just squash it out by making school, by saying, this is what you're going to learn today, whether you like it or not. And this is when you need to learn it by. And if you don't follow the program, you get an F or you get in trouble. And then your parents get upset and think you're failing.
Fear-based.
Really, it's all fear-based. It's
Right.
all like leveraging the grade as like, this is the sword that we're holding over your head. And it's that to me is what's the fundamental issue. If we have to listen to students first, and you talked about this in your last video, Pete, about listening to teachers, and we need to listen to the students as well. It comes from the bottom up, from the students. What are they interested in? What are they curious about? They'll want to learn. I think about my school experience. After I graduated, that's when I got curious about stuff and I started learning all kinds of stuff on my own.
Yeah.
When I'm told this is what you've got to read Tess of the D'Urbervilles or whatever, and I have no interest in that. I don't want. I'm 15. I don't want to read that. I
Yeah.
don't care. But I'll do what I have to do to pass the test. But if you told me at the time, read Catcher in the Rye, at that point, that was a book I really wanted to read, and I read it on my own and really enjoyed it. So it's like trusting that kids
Oh, yeah.
know what they need when they need it, and that they're gonna get where they need to be practically eventually if you just don't squash their desire to
Not
learn.
only that, but when you like also in that video, I said the farther away I get from the class as a student myself, the more I need to listen to my students to
Yeah.
hear what they are saying. So they have brilliant ideas, and when you say, "All right, let's try that," now they have buy-in and responsibility, and it's actually skin in the game. It's like, well, crap, they listened to me. I can't. They call my bluff. They want to do my idea. So there's energy to make it work then versus
Yeah.
what it's a game of what can I get out of and look like I'm doing, but not. It's like, okay, I love your idea. Let's try that. And when administrators that with teachers, that's a great idea. Let's try that. That's what administrators did with me. I started teaching my students on walks and giving free time and breaks, and then test scores went up. But I wanted to do that to prove that doing less actually produced more because they listened. So that made all the difference
Mm.
in the world. But it does for our students too. It's a great point.
But there's a pacing guide, you know?
That's
You
really
know,
the
that's
pacing
that's the
guide.
problem. That's the problem, and Mindy mentioned this, and I appreciate it, Mindy. You know, Mindy's saying that she spends a whole first week, you know, asking what they want to cover and writing the whole semester, and that's awesome.
That's
Like
great.
if you have that kind of liberty as a teacher, that's amazing. But there's so many teachers who are trapped not only with a pacing guide, but I know schools where they're saying to a sixth grade math teacher, you got to do the same problems, the same page, the same homework, so that when we come around and do the observations, everybody's doing the same thing. So and also so that no parents complain and say, well, this class is getting more homework or less homework. And this is like that's that command and control coming in, trying to control a system that's out of scale and just sees it as this technical process that they have to master.
Yeah, I don't know why they got so much emphasis on being sure everybody's doing the same thing on the same day at the same time.
Well, what's frustrating is I think this, like, the idea of uniformity being good, again, like, part of it I think is sincere, that people kind of bought into this sort of factory model of school. But I think a lot of it is, if you look at the bigger political context, what are a lot of the people that are pushing accountability really pushing? They're not really, they don't necessarily, like Todd said earlier, it's pretty much a bipartisan consensus in our legislature, for example, that we test too much. And every year, people on both sides put up bills to reduce the amount of testing, and we never do. And I think part of the reason, in addition to all the financial stuff that goes into, you know, Pearson having enough money to hire lobbyists all around the world, for example, but I think another part of it is that the alternative to this test grind is often presented as private schools, where you can have individualization and you can have your kid can, you know, go to a school that's all focused on equestrian studies or something like that. We don't want the public school kids to have that, because if we do, then we can't sell them on this alternative of this private voucher utopia that's never really going to exist. But that is, I think, part of what's being sold. I mean, I don't think it's like a straight up conspiracy or anything, but there's just a lot of incentive to focus on the negative because we're selling an alternative product.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people selling it really believe in it, but so they're not lying in their minds. But
I think it might be the idea is, look, public education screwed. At least we can save some and get them out to this much better situation. So the ones
right,
that
but
can
it's like
bail.
a chicken or egg thing, because the argument that we should replace public schools with private schools predates all of these supposed problems.
Right.
You know,
The
you have Milton Friedman first saying that school shouldn't be a public good, that it's better for the free market to do it. And then you have the Nation at Risk study saying we like that primarily because we want to lower taxes and we want to cater to people who want to segregate schools. So therefore, let's have a report that shows that the public schools are bad. And then we can say, well, y'all got X amount of time to turn it around, or else we're going to go with the thing that we wanted to do anyway, which is school vouchers. And we
Yeah.
create an impossibly high bar.
Yes.
And again, it's not one party. It's not one small group. It's very baked into our political system.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had Democrats and Republicans reauthorize No Child Left Behind,
Well,
or ESEA, or whatever you want to call it. Now it's called ESSA, but like essentially those same ideas of like testing to death and everything. Those are just embraced on both sides, because I think we want to sell an easy. Either we want to sell an easy fix for public schools, or we want to sell an alternative to public schools.
The cynical, I don't even cynical. I think the real part of me thinks that. So there's this whole idea that these people have been trying to privatize it for decades, and the only way to privatize it is to undermine public trust in the public education system. And the best way to do that is to make these arbitrary goals that are so high, like No Child Left Behind. Remember, we looked at the data and we were like, "What? Where are these arbitrary goals coming from?" You make it
2014. Everyone in the country has to be proficient.
Yeah, 80% of your kids need to be able to dunk a basketball, or it's like it's
bench 315
or bench. Yeah, right.
And then, if you keep that metaphor, it would be like, and if you don't bench 315, we're going to cut off one of your fingers.
That's right. Yeah.
Right, and then
we're going to try to make you do it again.
Right. Yeah, and then see what happens is there's this. I went to a school and they had the word sense of urgency on the walls as you go inside the school. And this is the whole climate, is that we have this urgent, and even in the words race to the top, no child left behind. There's this tightness, this urgency around the whole process. And the most cynical part of it is when they say they're doing it for kids in poverty. And I think it was Corey who said that the whole this accountability system and choice and these private school vouchers is to help these kids get out of the failing public schools, when they know that underneath it all, it's really just to enrich people the way our healthcare system is not a public healthcare system.
Well, to add data to support that,
yeah,
you look at how they raise the percentage of what it qualifies to be poor to receive those funds, and it's way above the poverty threshold line to ensure that individuals can get it. And then it's not enough money anyway if you truly were poor to afford the cost of getting there. I just want to throw that out there to emphasize how it does infuriate me too. They pitch it and they sell it like we're going to help these impoverished kids get out of the situation, but the reality of is that there's no way it was ever going to achieve that, and it's just to get more money to those schools that already don't need the darn money.
Well, it's to give the parents money that don't need it. I mean, you look at the states where they've implemented these vouchers, the vast majority of people who've taken advantage of these coupons or gift certificates are wealthy families already sending their kids to private schools in the first place. And then, I had Dr. J.R. I can't think of his last name. Is it J.R. Green? I can't think of his name. Sorry. My apologies. The superintendent of Fairfield County was saying the idea here is you pass these vouchers to begin with, and then the next step is the public school system collapses, so then everybody gravitates to the private. Then you just do away with the vouchers, and now everybody like they pay for their health care is paying now for their education, the way you mentioned Milton Friedman, because this is really what the people who believe in the free market is the solution for everything, is that we should all be paying for, privately for kids to go to school.
One big statement
that
goes along with that is the big problem with public school is it hasn't decided if it's daycare or if it's for academics. And right now it's doing a terrible job of both, because we're just there way too long. And some schools that don't have the charter schools or private schools like Legion's one, they have academic classes in the morning and in the afternoons for extracurricular activities, for go to the job. But that frees up a lot of stuff. Then kids need get extra help in the afternoons. You can't do that in traditional public school. But one thing, I bring this up because one way that impoverished areas are hurt, I know growing up in Chester, there's no place here for daycare at all. And then places that do, it's not affordable. So this is part of how schools have become, and even Governor McMaster said, we got to get schools going again during the pandemic. Why? So parents can go to work.
Right.
And we're accomplishing non-academics or good daycare this way for the ones that really neat stuff. So again, it's not, it's the whole thing's not set up really from what's best for the student. It's set up in let's half-ass it so we can do something to maintain the dogma we have of a work schedule, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And the to me, the other thing that's the other reason why I try to sound the alarm with teachers about this, and again, I don't like to be just critical. That's why I'm trying to show a vision of what we could have. But you mentioned earlier, one of you mentioned, I think, mentioned AI and the technology. If we reduce this process to a technical process, there's going to come a point where AI and machine learning can do that technical process of teaching kids just as well as a human being can. And if they can do it and it's more efficient and it's cheaper and they get better results on the test, then they really don't need the human element as much. So you can have kids just sitting around, like there are classrooms in other countries where you have cameras on them, make sure that they're paying attention to the screen, and they're just, you know, in front of a screen all day long, learning how to learn so they can pass this test. And that to me, that should be a scary scenario for any parent or for any teacher or student, is the idea that it's a technical process, because AI, machine learning will eventually be able to do that better than us. And that's why I'm saying education needs to be about the humanity. If we
Yes.
don't insist upon the humanity being in the system and we allow it to continue to be degraded, that's where we're going to end up, with kids going into school and just have someone watching them as they go into their
You'll have
virtual
security
reality
guards to be
goggles.
sure kids are compliant
Right.
and test proctors basically.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole thing's moving to. And because it's already moving that way, teachers don't feel like they're really needed anyway. So the teachers you're losing are your best and your brightest that don't want to just be test proctors to keep kids compliant, but actually want to help people not just do, but to actually, as you say, be. What does it mean to be alive? There was one great comment down there. I forgot who said it. Um, yes, we close our door and go do what's right, but we need to change the systems. We don't have to do what's best for students despite the district office, despite the terrible policies, despite all that. What a loss of energy that we have to work so hard just to do the right thing. That's draining it, and eventually, I can't do that anymore. So I think
Mm.
what my hope for it is that rather than engaging in educational malpractice, at an ethical responsibility to say, I'm sorry, I cannot do that. It's not good for my students because we're not becoming robots. We want to really be human.
Yes. Steve, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, and I think there was a lot of really interesting kind of talk about AI in the chat. I think John Warner, who he's a professor at Clemson, but he's primarily a writer. He wrote some great books. One of them's called Why They Don't Read, and it kind of gets into a lot of what we're talking about. But you can apply that to a lot of academic disciplines, not just not just reading, but like why aren't they interested? Because we give them BS to do. And I think one of the points he's made lately is if you're there's a big concern, understandably, that like writing instruction is really hard to do because kids are cheating with AI or whatever. And I think we all think that you could use AI in useful ways, but also if you're only teaching things that a machine can do, then you're not teaching the right things.
That's right.
But it's understandable why people are teaching those things, because that is what we've been doing things that a machine can assess for 50 years, because that's what a Scantron test is.
I wrote a song about that.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I think we need to think as teachers of ways to push in the other direction of like, and how to push the whole system in the other direction of, yeah, it's great in a way that a lot of kind of menial dumb tasks are going to be taken over by machines. That could be good. How are we going to teach our students to do the things that you need to be a human being to do? If we don't, and if we're not doing that, then what are we teaching them? Because even the argument of like everything should be about college and career readiness, which I don't think any of us is 100% behind, but even if that's your view, like you're what people are going into college and careers to do is going to change because of technology.
Right.
If we don't teach people how to embrace the things that make them individual humans, then they're not going to be successful there either.
Yeah, what's the point?
Right. Yeah, and even if you're right. Even if you could get a job, who wants to live in a world where you don't examine anything and you don't have art and you don't have poetry and all that stuff?
Yeah, just how fast can we get stuff done to do something else fast?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and so much of it is also too about how do I take care of my mental health, my physical health? How do I get along with other people and collaborate with other people and do creative projects with other people and live? This is the whole problem when with the profit motive. It's like we just got to figure out more efficient ways to get more out of labor. And of course, if machines can do it and it's cheaper and they don't go on strike and they don't complain, they don't show up late. What are we left with human being? Kids 30, 40 years from now, what are they left to do with their lives? And if machines can all do it better, if AI can do it all better, then what's the purpose of schools? And that kind of comes back to the topic of the what we're talking about tonight. Like fundamentally, what is the purpose of schools? Because if it's just to create kids who can do technical processes now, like you said, Steve, 30 years from now, those technical processes may not need humans to do them. And then what are humans left? What is their purpose of their life?
Yeah.
And why do we even bother teaching kids? Why do we even pay taxes for kids to go to school when we don't really need them to learn anything, quote unquote, useful or practical?
Yeah, one thing I do, I pull up ChatGPT with my students when we have to write something. I type it in and it gets it done in 10 seconds or whatever. And then I ask ChatGPT to write me a letter explaining why I love my son and why I love my daughter. I say, all right, I'm gonna go hand them this right here, and it's gonna mean something. And obviously, it can't do it no matter how hard or beautiful words, it just cannot express. Dolly AI drawing, beautiful drawings, but the drawing that my son or daughter gives me, that's inherently everything. And I think we've made people feel like they don't matter because it's all about
Yeah.
how aesthetic and these points and do this. But no, you can't measure it. This obsession with measuring everything,
Yeah.
perhaps. As you said, the
That's
art.
that's true. It's we're obsessed with objective data
Mhm.
and not the subjective experience and sort of the artistic part of teaching and
Yeah.
learning, which is the most beautiful part of it. Is the part that the reason why we got into it. We saw like Dead Poet Society or some movie that inspired us, where
Yeah.
we can make these connections and these relationships and develop kids' curiosity and have conversations and depth. Not just to
Mhm.
take them through a pacing guide and get them prepare them for the test, because that's so empty at the end of the day. For
Yeah, let's just,
you know,
you meet somebody you want to date. Hey, let's get our phones together with some kind of algorithm, let them talk back and forth, and we'll just go stare at the wall while our phones have a beautiful conversation. You, or let's go to the weight room, take my robot to the weight room to lift the weights for me. Uh, you know,
There's a reason the word robot is Czech and it means worker. And the whole idea of robotics from the early 20th century is we're going to be replaced by machines that can do the things that we can do. And what kind of jobs were those? Those were kind of mindless factory jobs that
Right.
people, like we mentioned Taylor earlier, were trying to mechanize and everything. So I think that's always been the answer. If we don't want to be replaced by machines, we have to stop acting like machines, and we have to
beautiful.
let machines do things for us that we don't want to do. And we have to figure out how to do the things that we do want to do.
Yes.
That is the perfect way to end this, Steve. Thank you so much. We are over time. We'll have to do a part 2 to this sometime. This is awesome. We had a lot of engagement, and I just want to say thank you, Steve, for your writing and for your being a thought leader and in so many different ways. What you write about is so important. You do such great research, and people need to read on the Cool website. You go to cool.us and just scroll down, and you'll see a section. It says Cool Views, and Steve's written several excellent pieces, and of course Pete and his amazing videos that he does, very easily digestible, and they immediately make me think. Or the one you did over the holidays, was so sarcastic, but I loved it. It was so funny, and I told Pete that we need to do like a sarcastic live stream sometime of talking about how much we love preparing kids for Scantron tests, and that's the whole
Yeah.
raison d'etre of
And put as many buzzwords as we can in acronyms that they love to drop.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you too so much for your time tonight, and I'll be in touch with you both soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks
Take care.
everybody
Thank
for
you,
watching,
Pete.
checking in. See you.
All right, that was Steve Nuzum and Pete Stone. I want to thank. Gosh, we had a lot of people checking in tonight. Mindy Penn is a teacher here in Horry County, and she also is a cool content creator who does something called Cool Stories. You can see that on the Cool website. And Larissa Black made a lot of comments, and she's going to be doing a live stream with me. I think it's on February 7th, and we're going to dive deep into artificial intelligence. And so that will be a really great conversation. Mary Beth White, thank you for tuning in. Marcella Weinsnyder, if you're not familiar with her, she is my cool partner. We've been working together for a long time, and she is a member of the cool team and doing amazing work with induction, the induction program. In fact, I'm going to show you real quick what she's doing. She and her partners, Angie Brush and Stephanie Johnson, do something called Cool Coaching. And this is geared towards induction teachers, but if you show up and you're not an induction teacher, they're not going to kick you out. But they do these free coaching sessions. It's one-on-one coaching sessions from 6 to 8 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can just go to cool.us/coaching. All you got to do is click a link. They'll put you in a breakout room, and you can talk to a veteran educator and get unfiltered, unbiased, honest feedback on any of the questions that you have about your teaching practice. So that's an amazing opportunity. I want to remind everybody that you can vote in the upcoming primaries here. The Democratic presidential primary is going to be on Saturday, February 3rd, and the Republican presidential primary is on Saturday, February 24th. And Corey, who also chimed in a few times tonight, she is the president of our local association here in Horry County. She's going to be talking about how she found her voice February 1st from 7 to 7:30. So join us for that conversation. She is an amazing leader, local leader here, and really not afraid to use her voice, and very inspirational. Want to remind you, if you're interested, we do have a few spots left, maybe one or two left for our educator mindfulness retreat. Yelena Popovich and I will be facilitating that. This graphic needs to be updated. It's actually going to be in Old Fort, North Carolina, June 12th through the 14th at Indigo Nature Retreat. And so if you want to find out information on that, just go to cool.us/retreat. And coming up in the summer in July, we're going to be working with Karen and Jennifer from Columbia College and their Masters of Education of Trauma-Informed Education program. We're going to be doing a whole day workshop on trauma-informed education. So lots and lots of cool stuff coming up. No pun. Actually, the pun is intended. It's cool stuff. And thanks again to Mindy, Larissa, Frank was watching. Thanks again to Pete and Steve for showing up tonight. Man, we had a lot of people commenting. Neil, thank you for checking us out. Cassie, and by the way, Cassie does a whole thing. She's a cool content creator. She does a whole thing on banned books. It's called Cool Books, and you can find that on the Cool website. And I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, missing anybody, but just so many. Early on, it was Jean from here in Horry County, and Martha. Thank you so much for everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate it. It was a wonderful conversation, and I hope that tonight's conversation. The thing is, like, my goal here at Cool is not to dictate how you should think about it, but for us to get to think more deeply about our profession and what's going on in our school systems. Like, let's have these kind of deeper conversations instead of just talking about, what kind of textbook, what kind of curriculum, what kind of method, what kind of app should I use. Let's dig deeper into what are we doing? Why do we do this in the first place? Let's dig really deeply into that, into the structures and cultures that we find ourselves in, because that to me is where everything else is sort of symptomatic. Like if you've got a tumor, yeah, there's palliative care that you can do. There's things that maybe will help you feel better, but you got to go in and you got to cut the tumor out. And what I'm seeing is a lot of our conversations in education are around the symptoms of the problem and not really talking about the core problem, which is really the system. And really, to me, the system right now, the operating system, is a system dominated by standardized testing. And until we address that, all the symptoms are going to still be there. We may be able to, hopefully get better pay, maybe more planning time, and all of that's important to fight for. But the systematic problem is that teachers are not respected, and they've turned our profession into a technical process, and they test and punish us. And that is, to me, the core issue, but maybe not to you. So you comment and let me know in the comments what you think the core issue, what you think the problems are, what we need to be focusing on. And the last thing I'm going to say is this. I want to invite you all into the movement. So this is what our movement's about. Our movement's not to say this is how you should think. Our movement's to say let's think together. Let's think collectively and come together, figure out how to make the change that we need to see. But we can't. It's hard to do that alone. It's hard when you're the one person in your building who's speaking out, or the one person in your district speaking out. We have to come together because in numbers there's power. And we've been too divided for too long in this state. There's only one teachers union in the state of South Carolina. One. And that's the South Carolina Education Association. We are an affiliate of the largest labor union in the United States, which is the NEA. 3.2 million educators across America are in the NEA. Every single National Teacher of the Year is a member of our union. And we have to come together at all three levels, at the national, state, and local level, because policy that impacts you and your students is made at the federal level, made at the state house in Columbia, and made in your local school board meetings and at your district office. And if we come together, there's nothing we can't accomplish. We've got all the power, we just don't use it. We have all of the power, but because we stay divided and we just go into our classrooms and shut our doors and hope that some other association is going to do the work for us, it doesn't work that way. The people have the power, but the people can't have the power when you're relying on one or two people or just an association to do that work for you. It has to be a collective, unionized effort. And the word solidarity is one that I really value, because what happens, I may have a good situation in my classroom. I may have a great principal. I may be in a great district. But until every single teacher and every single student across this state has access to a high quality public school education, and across the country, we have to keep fighting together. And we can do that together. And if you're interested in doing that, look at the bottom of your screen. You can go to jointhescea.org. Or you can type the word join on your phone, text the word join to 48744. We invite you into the movement. You can join now and get there. Yeah, there's benefits. There's all kinds of like travel benefits and stuff like that, but it's really more than the benefits. I mean, the benefits for me pay for my dues, but it's more than that. It's about building a movement where we can actually change things, because so many teachers feel helpless. So many teachers feel trapped in this system, but we have the power to change it. If we would just come together, we can make those changes. But you stay separate, you stay hopeless, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. When we stay divided and we stay hopeless and we stay cynical, that's what the privatizers want. They want you to get hopeless. They want you to be cynical and think there's nothing you can do. And then eventually the public trust in public education erodes and public schools go away. And then our democracy's done. I mean, that's really where we are in this country. Public schools are one of the last remaining pillars of our democracy. And if we don't fight to change it, we're dooming future generations of American children to a life where they don't have a democracy. I mean, the fight is that important. And I hope that you won't sit on the sidelines anymore. And if you have joined us and you've got people in your building sitting on the sidelines, I hope that you'll go and knock on each one of their doors and say, we need you to get off the sidelines and get in the movement with us at the SCEA. Until next time, have a great night and God bless you. I love all educators and what you do. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care.